This video is going to be a film study preview of the Ravens-Bengals Week 5 matchup in Cincinnati. I'm going to focus this one on the Bengals defense and what is the Bengals defense that awaits the Ravens on Sunday afternoon. They're bottom 10 in the league right now in rushing yards allowed at 582 yards through 4 games. It's very difficult to watch this Bengals defense knowing what they used to do, 2021 and 2022 specifically. Really high level, timely stops, forcing turnovers against some of the best teams in the league. Now they're basically giving up 120 rushing yards a game at the same time that they're tied for last in the NFL with 5 sacks. Now that includes 3 sacks by their badass defensive end, Trey Hendrickson. I'll let some film flow through here while I talk about some of the stats. Other than Trey Hendrickson, like I said, he's got 3 sacks and 6 quarterback hits. The rest of the Bengals defense has produced 2 sacks and I think 10 or 11 quarterback hits total. And one of those sacks was a third down scramble where Dax Hill stepped up to sack Jacoby Brissett in week 1 on a scramble. So they're just not producing, they're just not getting pressure or generating pressure at all consistently on quarterbacks without Trey Hendrickson. Of course, he had a stinger last week. He's practiced, I think, in limited participation the last couple of days, but it looks like he'll be a full go. I personally think Lou Anarumo is a spectacular defensive coordinator. He did an unbelievable job in 2021 and 2022, particularly them making it to the Super Bowl and then the AFC Championship game. In the postseason, his defenses seemed to get better, not that they weren't already good. This year's been weird. Cam Taylor-Britt is an extremely high-level corner who, at this point, was actually taken off the field some last week against Carolina. He only played 36 snaps. DJ Turner, Michigan product, also very talented, I think a second-round draft pick 2 years ago, played more snaps than CTB did. So there's an unusual dynamic going on there. They just released a defensive tackle who had played a lot of snaps for them this year, Zach Carter. Miles Murphy will make his debut in 2024. Trey Hendrickson going through a stinger issue. There's a lot of question marks as it relates to this defense coming into week 5. And what makes it even more challenging to try to evaluate is this has normally been a defense that's very prepared overall, but specifically against the Ravens. They normally have a very diverse game plan against Lamar Jackson, where they have a display situational awareness, multiple coverages, multiple blitzes, typically trying to force Lamar and the offensive coordinator, whether it's Greg Roman or Todd Monken, to adjust to Lou Anarumo's coverage / blitz choices. However, you can only be so effective at dictating to the offense if you don't stop the run. And they have not in 2024. The Bengals have not done so consistently. In fact, they've allowed 2 100-yard rushers, Ramondre Stevenson in week 1. I think he had 120, and then Chuba Hubbard last week, 108. I want to break down some of the successful run concepts that stick out on film, mostly focusing on weeks 1, 2, and 4. So against the Patriots in week 1, they give up 170 on the ground. The Chiefs in week 2, a game really I think that the Bengals played probably their best defense of the season, even though from a points allowed standpoint, they only allowed 16 against the Patriots. The difference in talent between week 1 against the Patriots and week 2 against the Chiefs is large. I think they played a better brand and quality of defense against the Chiefs. They intercepted Mahomes 3 times. One of which didn't count for a BS penalty down away from the play. Surprise, surprise. And then really could have got out of there with a win in the fourth quarter anyway. Finally, week 4 against the Panthers gave up 155 on the ground. How much impact is it that DJ Reader's gone? It certainly seems to be a gaping hole there, but they'll bring back a defensive tackle, I think McKinley Jackson this week, having Trey Hendrickson apparently available to play. I think the Ravens should run the ball at him. I'm not saying that it's going to be tremendously successful, like he's a weak point in the run game. He's certainly not. But I think that they should attack him and try to make him play, exert as much effort as possible, whereby perhaps wear him down, grind down the Bengals front defense. There's just a lot of concepts that have worked against them so far this year, whether it's 11 personnel, 12 personnel, under center, shotgun, RPO. All of those concepts have had success against this defense. Additional to that, the safeties, Von Bell, Geno Stone, I think have had trouble coming up and tackling in a manner that wipes out a mistake by the front. So if you make a mistake up front, maybe a poor fit or a player gets reached, what have you, the safeties can come up and limit it to a 4 or 5 or maybe a 6-yard gain. That's not happening so far with Cincinnati. They've allowed at least 24 points in each of the last 3 games. Again, that week 1 loss at home against the Patriots, 16-10, where they gave up 170 on the ground. The safeties just have not come up and wiped out mistakes, number one. Number two, there's no violence to their finish at all at the safety level. It surprised me to watch this Bengals defense look like this because I think so highly of Lou Anarumo and what they have accomplished there. Teams are bringing a sixth offensive lineman, a jumbo set, onto the field, and the Patriots, in this case, do it multiple times in week 1. The Bengals still had difficulty stopping the run. It was almost like, I don't want to say lack of awareness, but there was definitely situations where they were not dialed in to attack. And so what I mean is, very rarely do you get any level of contact beyond or at the line of scrimmage. I believe last week, Hubbard had 78 yards before contact out of 108. That's really poor for any team, but particularly for a defense that I think has significant talent. Again, they've dealt with injuries. The interior defensive line, release Zach Carter. They'll bring back McKinley Jackson, so maybe they feel like they're going to shore up some things up front. They do play a lot of nickel defense, and they do rely on Mike Hilton, who hasn't practiced a single day this week. Nonetheless, he's only listed as questionable. I think Mike Hilton's one of the better nickel defenders in the league. I think the Ravens have got to account for him. When he lines up out here at nickel, he's often used as a blitzer off the edge in run or pass situations. He's just disruptive as hell. There's been occasional times in the last 2 or 3 years where I felt like he had trouble matching up with particular longer, bigger, fast receivers. Marquez Valdez-Scantling in the AFC Championship game 2 years ago, if you recall. But generally, I think Mike Hilton's a fantastic football player. And if he were to not play, let's do it this way. If Hilton and Hendrickson were to not play, that defense is missing 2 of their best 3 players, with Logan Wilson being the other. It looks like Hendrickson's going to go. He practiced in limited fashion, I think, the last 2 days or last 3 days. This is why I usually wait until Fridays to put out my previews, because I want to see the injury report. I don't want to talk about a player necessarily who's not going to play. I don't think that these guys are, in the Chiefs game, guys were striking ball carriers. They looked really fired up to go into Kansas City and get a win, which they almost did. It just looked like a different defense, particularly against Washington. I mean, they didn't force a single punt yet. The Commanders didn't punt for, I think, 2 weeks, and they've scored a lot of points. Jaden Daniels playing really well. So I don't want to say threw that game out, but I didn't look at that game as much from the standpoint of what's the floor for this Bengals defense. If they can't fit the run any better and be downhill at all, then they're going to have significant trouble with Derrick Henry, whether it's under center, whether it's shotgun stuff. Not even talking about Lamar Jackson keeping on the option. They tend to be a more balanced team against the option, meaning they're not selling out to take away the running back. They're not running right at Lamar, which is normally what the Steelers will do. The Steelers will run at Lamar and force a give read. That dynamic's going to change, by the way, the next time we face the Steelers, because now we have Derrick Henry. Jet sweep concept. This is Xavier Legette. I think they ran it 3 times last week. 8-yard gain outside to the edge. You're just looking at a defense that doesn't fit things as well. Certainly doesn't set the edge in the same manner. I think it was third or fourth quarter before Trey Hendrickson got hurt. But as you watch this film, you should be able to notice the force component, whether it's a safety, a nickel defender, a corner coming up, they just don't seem as they just don't seem to be as violent, and there don't seem to be as many hats to the football. I don't know what the dynamic is. I don't pretend to have an awareness of why they look so different. Last year's defense in 2023 was a fall off from, I think, the standard they had set in 2021 and 2022. To watch them through 4 games this year, they're even worse than 2023. Hendrickson is normally going to set stuff inside. You see another example of a safety coming up and being unable to impact the run game at all. Hendrickson's going to normally set things inside, so he will maintain outside leverage. You can kick him out and run inside of that gap, if you can get enough hats to the football, I think we're looking at a very interesting situation for the Ravens as it relates to, let me get back to that play, sorry, as it relates to the ball on the left hash, Hendrickson here, and if they want to play their base nickel, meaning the Bengals want to play a base nickel defense, they're going to have to roll the boundary side safety down, whether we're in 11 personnel or 12 personnel with Likely. Additional to that, 20 personnel with Ricard. I'm very interested in what the Bengals do. I expect them to stay in their base nickel. Essentially, what I'm getting at is if Hendrickson's going to play, which he is, and he's going to set stuff inside, which is what he does historically, they're going to have a significant amount of trouble dealing with runs inside of that gap once he gets kicked out. Now, he doesn't get expanded. He doesn't create a soft edge. Someone is going to be put in a tremendous amount of conflict. It's going to be the boundary side safety, and I think the Bengals have already had trouble executing or navigating that run-pass balance to the boundary, not giving up big plays in the pass game while getting chewed up at the same time by the run. So let me be real specific about what I'm talking about in terms of the Bengals' nickel defense. I don't think that they'll be in this particular alignment. This is obviously Derrick Henry's first touchdown of the game against the Bills. You can see the nickel defender for the Bills is in the top left portion of the screen. The ball is on the right hash, so the boundary, the short side of the field, is over here. I talk about it constantly, probably a little bit too much. Point being, you as a defense, if you put your nickel defense on the field against any personnel grouping, every personnel grouping, I should say, you put yourself at risk of giving up plays to the boundary, particularly run concepts where we can utilize the angles that are easily predetermined by Todd Monken based upon you having the nickel on the field. Generally, if the nickel is to the field, tight end to the boundary, you're going to get a 3 technique to the boundary and a shade 1, canted nose, whatever you want to call it, to the field. It gives you an idea of how they're going to line up, number 1. Number 2, helps you develop your blocking schemes and have them predetermined such that the players can go out there and execute on Sunday against the same exact look that they practiced against all week. Todd Monken loves to attack to the boundary with the run game, sometimes with the pass game as well. This one happens to actually be a cutback by Derrick Henry, who's just rolling at this point, 350 yards rushing the last 2 weeks. Do I think the Ravens are just going to go in there and obliterate the Bengals with the run game? No. I think that Lou Anarumo has to have some type of adjustment. They're not going to be able to just sit in their almost base defense. I mean, really, they're a base 4-3 team, and they've got 3 really good inside linebackers. I actually think 59 is very underrated. Already think highly of Wilson and Pratt in terms of how they play on the field. Those guys make timely tackles, get their hands on the football often as well. This is going to be a game, I think, where Lou is going to have to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of stopping the run early, forcing the Ravens into known passing situations where now he can kind of play the same game that he does play so well against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. For whatever reason, the Bengals always defend the Chiefs well. They did lose in week 2, 26-25 on the road. We know the circumstances of the fourth quarter, but he does a great job of mixing coverages up, forcing some post-snap processing by Mahomes or any quarterback for that matter if he gets him in that situation, such that the defense has an advantage in coverage and trying to get to the quarterback, having that little extra time, 0.3, 0.4 seconds to try to get there and influence in a negative fashion the quarterback's flow, just basically disrupt their processing. In order for that to happen, they've got to have a plan to stop the run game. And unfortunately for the Bengals, the Ravens having Derrick Henry first and then Lamar Jackson as a potential guy to keep it off of the option or boot concepts is going to create tremendous amount of conflict, I think, number 1. And number 2, possibly help the Ravens generate big plays in the pass game on play action. I want to show some film now of some of the third down coverages that the Bengals are using in 2024. Also speak about the conflict that's created when you face a guy like Lamar Jackson. Likes to play a lot of man on third downs once they've got you in a known passing situation. Actually going to take a look at one play from the 2023 game, the Week 2 win up in Cincinnati. This is fourth quarter. This is actually the last drive of the game. The Ravens go down and run the football out of an unbalanced set a couple of times and close out the game. This is a very important play that preceded that, however. So 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3. And you can see they're doubling Mark Andrews, man everywhere else, middle of the field free safety, and it's a three-man rush against Lamar. I would call it a 3+1. So three-man rush with a spy, in this case, Logan Wilson. There's certain things I just have always believed you cannot do against Lamar Jackson. I think one of them is man-free with a four-man rush. Spy stuff, I think it was Mike Tomlin who said it best. It just doesn't work against Lamar Jackson. I don't think it works from the standpoint of you're going to sack him. You've got to just front him up and stay in his way. I don't think we're going to see this coverage from Lou in this game, but we did actually see it in Week 11 in the return matchup in Baltimore. So what I mean by that is the doubling of Mark Andrews, who hasn't had a tremendous impact this year, obviously, in terms of overall catches, touchdowns, or anything like that. We've got Isaiah Likely as another weapon, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar, who's won his fair share of matchups so far this year. Those guys can win when given opportunity. More on the Ravens' passing attack later because Lamar actually threw the ball really well against the Bengals in the rematch last year in Week 11. Third downs, play a lot of man. CTB, I think, is an excellent man defender. Dax Hill been converted or moved to an outside corner. First of all, I'm glad to see him have a dedicated position and not be moved around so much. If you don't know, that's Justice Hill's brother, by the way. Super athletic guy from Michigan. And then DJ Turner, actual Michigan product in terms of the college he went to, is their third corner, who, like I said, last week played more snaps than CTB, which is unusual. I do think that in a four-man rush situation when they play man, that they are opening themselves up to Lamar possibly being able to scramble more. Now, there's a little bit of a combo nature to this particular coverage here. It's a 3rd and 5 from Week 1 against the Bengals, or against the Patriots. And you certainly have these guys dropping out of here like zone. Oftentimes, they're man on number 1 which is the same thing the Ravens do, to be honest with you. So you will see, and this is what bothers me a little bit about coverage designations, because you get man to one side, zone to the other often in the NFL. In this case, it happens to be zone to the boundary, but you also see Logan Wilson dropping out of there with a zone delineation or a zone alignment to the field, and then man by the slot defender and the outside receiver. So it's not that simple, if you ask me. What I do know is if it's a four-man rush against Lamar Jackson and you have guys turning their backs to run downfield to play man, even if it's just to one half of the field, you're opening yourself up to potential disaster. I think the Steelers make different tactical choices. They bring pressure against Lamar, make him get rid of the ball so he can't scramble. I do wonder if Lou would like to do that a little bit more often. Unfortunately, and this is not a knock on Geno Stone, I think this is just reality, you only have so many coverage guys on that defense, and Geno Stone is not one of them. So the more you allocate to bring pressure, the more you possibly expose yourself to Geno Stone actually covering someone in a man-to-man situation, which I just don't think they want to do. They would like to utilize Von Bell, obviously Mike Hilton if he plays in those situations. If Hilton doesn't play, I'm interested to see what they do with Dax Hill, CTB, and DJ Turner. Do they move Dax Hill to more of a slot corner situation, which is what he's done prior to 2024 a little bit more often? He's got great instincts. He's in, just so you know, he's in man at the top of the screen here. This is a 3rd down, Week 1 against the Patriots. He's in a man relationship. Brissett gets out of the pocket, and Dax Hill is able to scramble. Now, it's a 3rd and 11, so Brissett's not going to get the first down anyway, but this is one of the 5 sacks that the Bengals have on the year. Like I said, in the lead-in, they only have 5 sacks, 3 of which are by Hendrickson, and 1 of which was on a scramble/unsettled situation like you saw there. They play some Tampa 2, however, as well, and Lou has done this. He plays everything. When they do play Tampa 2, there's not necessarily a giveaway from a Mike linebacker standpoint all the time. You do see a little bit more depth from the Mike in this position, alt number 1, number 2. You actually have the nickel defender to the boundary. That will be interesting to see if the Ravens, out of their 11 personnel grouping, ever get the nickel into the boundary, because I would think if we get the nickel to the boundary, we're going to look to run the ball to the field immediately. I would call it a star route concept. These guys running deep comebacks at like 10, 12, 13 yards. Brissett hits, I think it's Thornton, for like 16 or 17 yards against that Tampa 2. This one will result in an interception against the Chiefs. As an aside, I think Davis Gaither, 59, is a very underrated football player. I also think Travis Kelce should sit this route down, not get so much depth. It really created a long throw for Mahomes, who also took too long to get there. It's a Tampa 2, again with two corners in the flats, half-field safeties, and then Logan Wilson running in the middle of the field with the vertical. Mahomes looking to his left initially, comes back to the middle of the field, basically throws it right to Davis Gaither. So I understand you may not be as impressed with it as I am. He played very well against the Chiefs, and I think Pratt had an injury designation, but should be good to go. Were he not to be good to go, Davis Gaither is a pretty good football player also. They had significant trouble last week with Xavier Legette. 6 catches, I think 66, 68 yards, something like that. Big, strong receiver. We don't necessarily have that, but we've got two big tight ends, Likely and Andrews, who can both go get the football. It's a one-on-one against DJ Turner. I thought all of the corners, excuse me, let me rephrase that. Turner and CTB had difficulty against Legette last week, in my opinion. Running across the field, it's going to be Hilton matched up with him. Hilton passes him off to the safety. Legette here. A little over concept. This is not a third down, by the way. It's a first and goal from the 8. Andy Dalton played quite well last week. They scored 24 points. There's a little bit of a play action element to this. Also a clear out by, I think it's Mingo here, just pulling this defender out of that space. And then Legette running onto the goal line, onto the throw by Dalton. Geno Stone unable to converge on it. Like I said, Stone took over the route from Mike Hilton, who passed it off to the middle and kind of replaced Geno Stone. I think we want to put Geno Stone in coverage situations, not when he's necessarily a deep middle of the field player, but I think we would like to get him covering people, or trying to at least. CTB has been, I'm someone who has an incredibly high opinion of him. I still think he's very young, he's very confident and athletic. Nonetheless, I don't think he's played to the standard, at least that I have for him so far this year. This is Deontay Johnson, getting him turned around a little bit. CTB unable to make a play on the ball, unable to get a PD or anything like that. 21-yard touchdown on a first down. 4-man rush, Dalton, nice ball. These are the things I think that are there for Lamar. Well, they were there for Lamar last year, to be honest with you. We were able to get things accomplished in the pass game. It's not like CTB gets easy matchups and is getting beat, but there's just a level of play for him that he's not attained so far consistently. And again, I think Zach Taylor, their head coach, kind of avoided the question. There was 2 questions in a press conference this past week about how many snaps DJ Turner played against the Panthers versus how many snaps CTB played. He's going against really good receivers, first of all. It's a great throw by Mahomes, 44-yard touchdown to Rashee Rice up the left sideline. Of course, Rice is at this point out for the year. We've had trouble beating CTB deep or anything for that matter, but nonetheless, the Ravens were able to get a lot accomplished in the pass game last year against the Bengals, and that's with a 68-yard touchdown on a screen to Zay Flowers being called back for really a BS penalty on OBJ. That's a brilliant pass defense up to the top side against Bateman by CTB. This is film from last year's game, by the way, in Baltimore. Week 11, I believe. So it's just surprised me to see his snap count be smaller or lower than DJ Turner, who's also very talented. Lamar did a great job last year, I thought, processing their coverages. Monken put them in situations. We did run for, I think, 157 on 5.3 or 5.1 yards per carry, something like that. If we can meet or exceed that number, if we can get to 160 on the ground, I think we're really putting ourselves in a great position to control the ball and also avoid 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7 situations where Lou can kind of dial up his different looks and kind of create some magic in terms of putting Lamar in post-snap processing situations to possibly allow the pass rush to get there. Pretty much the same route combination I showed against the Patriots. And again, you've got a Tampa too. So you will see more of that, I think, from the Bengals than perhaps a lot of other teams. And they did play it. I had it 4 times last year against the Ravens in that Week 11 matchup. I think it was Bateman's first touchdown of the year last year. On this little scramble, Lamar finds him again. It's against CTB. I happen to think that the Ravens offense can get a lot done against the Bengals defense this year. I do expect to see them elevate their play defensively. I expect to see Lou come in with a solid game plan. I expect to see their guys, especially their remaining core, Hilton, Hendrickson, Logan Wilson. CTB is new, meaning he was not there for their first Super Bowl run. I expect to see them play at a higher level than we have witnessed so far through 4 games. What is their ceiling, though? Like, literally, how well can this defense play? What's the level that they can attain when dealing with all the weapons that the Ravens offer? If you were to do it this way and say, how could the Bengals stop or slow down the Ravens, it would be prevent us from running the football, particularly to the boundary, win in pass rush situations against particularly right side of our offensive line. But Roger Rosengarten played pretty well last week, I thought. And then get some turnovers. Let's face it, they got 3 turnovers against the Chiefs on the road. Had a lead in the 4th quarter. Very easily could have won the football game. In any case, the Chiefs are right there still. I think in order for this Bengals defense to stop or significantly slow down the Ravens offense for 60 minutes, they've probably got to be +2. Now, I guess it's independent of what their offense does against our defense from a turnover standpoint. I think they need 2 turnovers in order to hold us down. We're averaging 430 yards per game, which is the best in the NFL. We're also averaging 6.8 yards per play. Now, there's some big plays in there, most notably the 87-yard touchdown run by Derrick Henry last week. But there's so many 10 to 11 to 12-yard gains for this Ravens team. I didn't even talk about the screens at all in this preview. I am usually a person that's quite negative, or at least focus on the really good things that a defense can do. I think those things kind of go unsaid with this Bengals team. Hendrickson had 17.5 sacks this year. Mike Hilton, one of the best nickel defenders in the league, if you ask me. Very balanced. Perhaps there's other guys who are more sticky in coverage at times, but I really like Mike Hilton's game. Logan Wilson is an underrated inside linebacker. So is Pratt, for that matter. But I understand why Ravens fans would hold a negative opinion of Wilson, obviously. Von Bell coming back to them, I think, was an interesting pick, trying to pair him with Geno Stone as the strong safety, Bell, to the free safety, Stone. Moving Dax Hill to outside corner certainly gives them some depth. So on paper, they should be better than they are. Will they course correct over the course of the season? If they do, hopefully it comes after Week 5. It's a home matchup in Cincinnati, Sunday afternoon. I look for them to play a better brand of defense with multiple guys coming back. Nonetheless, this Ravens offense has so much talent. And if they avoid turnovers, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to put up 24-plus points against this Bengals defense that really hasn't met the standard of a Lou Anarumo coordinated defense in my mind. Guys, let me know what you think of the preview in the comment section. Probably left some elements out in terms of the individual matchups that we'll see. I think Isaiah Likely could play a big role here, particularly into the boundary. No matter how they choose to cover him, whether they roll a safety down or not, I think Likely is a real matchup problem for them. And in the past, they have allocated a ton of resources to even stop or slow down Mark Andrews. There's a lot of choices that Lou Anarumo is going to have to make on Sunday afternoon, and that the coaching staff had to try to implement from a game plan standpoint. And I think they're up against I think it's an uphill climb for Cincinnati this week. Appreciate you guys' time, man. If you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comment section. If you think other Ravens fans would enjoy this film study / preview of the Ravens Week 5 matchup, a critical game against the Cincinnati Bengals, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.